are listening to Fast Track Podcast, the place to be to fast track your personal finance or fast track your business, or both, through a series of conversations with those who have learned it, done it, and made it. Brandon Miller is an immigration law expert, author, and managing director of boutique immigration practice, Maple Immigration Services, and the creator of Second Passport, which empowers people with the information they need to secure a second home in Canada. Whether it's a change in lifestyle, new opportunities, or retirement, it's crucial to have a second passport and a second option. Brandon is here to explain why. Welcome to Fast Track Podcast, Brandon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Maybe would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're going to talk about today?
Awesome. So my name is Brandon. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. I've been helping people come to Canada and find a safe, secure second home here for about 10 years. I've done that both on the legal representation side and also in a way that I help newcomers settle in. Prior to that, I lived overseas for about 15 years. I spent about most of my time in Asia and the Middle East. So I always like to say that I was out kind of seeing the world now and bringing the world to me here in Canada, which is fantastic.
Interesting. Yeah. Where have you lived in Asia and the Middle East?
So I was in Korea for a little while. I was there for about 4.5 years. I spent 8 years in the Philippines. I spent a little bit of time in and out, mostly in Hong Kong. And then in the Middle East, I was in Kuwait, but I've traveled all over, both for business and pleasure throughout the Middle East and Asian regions predominantly. Yeah.
Oh, sounds very exciting because I really like this topic about being able to travel to different countries or being able to live in different countries. And now you're an immigration lawyer. I have lots of questions for you on behalf of our audience. And what do you do as an immigration law expert?
Yeah. So normally what we do is we are your representative. So we will actually prepare the file from start to finish. We'll work with the government and deal with any of the questions or concerns that they have on the file. So you're not even speaking to the government. And then on top of that, what I like to say is that we actually will be your guide in the journey that you're going on, the immigration journey. And a lot of what I say to my team or new people on my team is I'll say, listen, a lot of people, they're like, oh, like I'm paying you to fill out forms. And I'm like, well, you have no idea really what I do, because that's only one facet of it. And the biggest facet is that a lot of people, they don't understand what's going to happen next. And I call it like the black box of this bureaucratic immigration department. So once you send in your file, you don't actually know what's going to happen to it. So I'm there to tell you like, oh yeah, this is fine. This is what's going to happen. This is the next step. And then if we get a request, I'm like, that's not right. Why are they asking this? What can we do? Because again, the immigration department's not your friend. And again, they don't want to say no to you, but they can't say yes to you if there's something that's wrong with the file. So if there's something that's a little out of whack, we like to get ahead of it and deal with that so we can understand it. A lot of times it just takes providing more context or information. That's generally what I do.
And what are the main purposes that people are looking to immigrate?
So normally there's a number of different purposes depending on the person and where they're coming from normally, but here are some of the more popular ones. Canadian education, healthcare, so free education, for instance, up to 12 and obviously subsidized. We have some pretty good schools here. So that's one of the things. The healthcare is a huge benefit to a lot of people. I don't know if you have any Americans that are listening, but we're dealing with a lot more Americans these days. And we hear that a lot from that side of the border. Some of the other stuff, retirement benefits, the social benefits, we've got really great systems here for that. We hear a lot of things about the environment, for instance. Recently, I had a lady, it was absolutely fascinating. It was the first time I heard it. She was from China, and she said to me, she was deciding between Australia and Canada. I'm always very curious about people. And I said to her, well, why did you choose Canada? And she's like, I kind of think that Canada is going to have a lot more water in 75 years. And I was like, That's interesting. That's a really long-term view. And it was something it brought to bear, like, yeah, she was talking about the environment. That was about probably 4 or 5 years ago. But I'm starting to hear that a lot more too. And people are seeing that now. We're seeing these huge storms start to happen. We're seeing water shortages in different areas and rising sea levels and things like this. And I think if that people are taking a longer term view, not only for themselves, but maybe what is the world going to look like for your kids or your grandkids? Having a second home or a second passport as that option might be something that would be interesting. I know just going along, like I've talked about the US and China there, in some countries, a lot of people will look at it as a second passport as a tool. They'll look at it as something that they can use for business. They'll look at it as something where, they might use it as a travel tool because they need to travel to different countries. So they'll have it like that. Or they might be looking at it as kind of like, oh, it's my backup just in case. In the Western world, a lot of people don't really think like that, and that thinking is not there. However, and I would say in the last 5 or 6 years, a lot more people are starting to think like that. So I always like to educate people on some of the benefits of having a second passport, and that's certainly one of them. There's a few other things that I like to mention. There's, a very multicultural society in Canada. Diversity is actually embraced to a large extent. So I'm pretty happy about that. And then there's another thing that I actually only recently came to my attention about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And it sounds really crazy, but it's like, you can actually extend your life living here. And I'll give you an example. I was looking at like average lifespan. The average lifespan in Canada is about 82 and a half to 83. Now, I know it's not the top. I think the top was Japan. And then some of the Northern European, like Scandinavian countries actually rate very high. But Canada is quite up there. But if you start comparing countries, say like India or the Philippines, you're looking at 68 and a half as the mean age, which is pretty interesting because, that's 14 years of life. And I think that, there's a lot of different things that can play into that. We know that stress and we know that pollution, for instance, cleaner environments and all of these things might be contributing factors. I don't know if that was a bit of a long-winded answer there for you. I apologize, but hopefully that provided some context.
And also for individuals, each person has his own regions. But in general, you talk about the quality of life, the accessibility to education, healthcare, and environmental issues as well. And what are the top most popular countries for people to immigrate?
So USA, generally it's China, India, Philippines, generally jockey for the top three spots. But we're seeing a lot of people that are in the Middle East. So the UAE, for instance, and all the different areas, mostly expats that are in those areas. So a lot of people, I'll use the example of, say the Indian accountant, right? So there's a lot of like Indian accountants, and sorry if there's Indian accountants listening, I'm not singling you out here, but what I'm trying to say is that, that Indian accountant will go, they'll work in Dubai. And then, as part of them being in Dubai as an expat, they're exposed to pretty comfortable life, but it's actually only as good as when you're working there. A lot of people will look at Canada for the longevity in terms of being able to have a permanent residence option and actually a passport. And again, looking generally for long-term for the children. So that's a big one. I started off with the US there because I know that you have a lot of listeners from the US, but we're seeing that as, well, it's not the biggest source country, and I don't think it's going to be the biggest, but I think it's actually going to be a lot more significant than it has been. Generally, there was about 10 to 15,000 people that would immigrate a year, but those numbers have been going up. There was an article I read, it was in CNN there, and again, I'm not quoting, but somebody had said, one of the guys in there was talking about immigration to Canada, and there was a 700% increase about a year ago. We saw exactly that as well. Like I've seen huge increases, and it's not only tied to election time, but what we've seen after 2020 is that actually there was a bump, and it was a sustained bump, and people were taking action, which was different than say 2016.
And you also mentioned the Philippines. Are people interested in immigrating to Philippines from other countries?
Coming from the Philippines to Canada, yeah, we've got lots of Filipinos. The Filipino expat population in Canada is now quite significant. It has been for years, but it is actually rating definitely in the top 5 anytime that you go, for sure.
Okay, now I understand. You mean the top 5 countries where people are from immigrate to
Yeah,
Canada.
immigrating to Canada. Yeah. I actually immigrated to the Philippines when I was there for 8 years. So I've done that whole process. A lot of Filipinos are coming here, like a lot. So it's quite significant.
Is it easy? How do people do that? What are the common ways to immigrate to Canada?
So it really is a personalized approach that we take and that everybody should take. And what I mean by that is that most people, unless you're married, or unless you're, falling under some sort of protected person or refugee type area, then you're going to come through an economic pathway. An economic pathway means that you're, basically doing it on your own steam, as I like to say. So generally you might come as a worker and then transition into permanent residence and then become a citizen, or you might come as a student and then study for a year and then work for a year and then do permanent residence and then become a citizen. You might be able to apply directly from overseas. If you're able to do that under something called the Federal Skilled Worker Program, then you'd be like direct to PR and then a citizen. But really what happens is when you look at the economic programs, most of them are done through a system. It's an application system called the Express Entry System. It's a points-based system that's based on age. It's based on education, language skill, and work experience. We're looking for people who are between the ages of 20 to 29. If you're between the ages of 20 to 29, have a university degree, have excellent English or French skills, and have 1 year of skilled work experience. And skilled work experience can be anything from, a cook or a chef, for instance, or an admin assistant, like a secretary or something along those lines. That's actually skilled work experience, a tradesperson, all of these different things. There's a wide range of types of jobs that can qualify for that. But if you're in that kind of demographic or have that skill set, you have a pretty good chance of coming directly to Canada and just filing the application, which is a good way to go. The benefit there is that you actually can come directly, get everything, get your permanent residence, and within 3 years have your passport. And then you're done, finished, and through the system. And again, it's different for everybody. If you're a little older, for instance, or you have significant financial capital, you can start a business, and then you can employ yourself under that business, and then you can immigrate that way. So that's another option, but that's it.
You mentioned that for people who fulfill this criteria have a very decent chance. Like a lot of people can fulfill that criteria in the world, and then not every single person can get the visa in Canada. What are the other, added points to their profile?
So that's a really good question. What I said is very general, but it's also very personalized. So how it works is that you're put into a pool and we take the top points, right? So you can increase your points. So for instance, a good way, and what we're seeing a lot of, is people are coming here and they're studying for a year. They're doing like a 1 year postgraduate study. And so then they get points for Canadian education, which is an extra 15 points. And then if they're single and they work in Canada for a year, they get an extra 40 points. If you're in that demographic that I just mentioned, and then you add those two things in it, it's very difficult for you to screw that up points wise. You are going to get an invitation to stay in Canada and get your PR. It's an inevitable, unless you really work to screw that one up.
Average university graduate between the 20 to 29 in another country outside of Canada, and they speak fluent English, and they apply for a master degree or like MBA in Canada, and they study there, and then they find a job, stay and work for a year, and they can be invited to join as a PR.
I would feel safe saying that you would have to work to screw that up. That would be very difficult to screw up. Your points would be so high at that point that no matter what, the history of that system and the history of the points, which has been about 6 to 7 years, that would put you in like the top percentage of any time there was a draw, you would be invited.
All right, I see. And how easy it is to find a job in Canada as a foreigner and then get a working permit? Two scenarios. One is directly coming out of Canada, and then the other one is studied in Canada, graduated there, and then find a job there.
The first one I would say is nearly impossible. And if you're overseas and you're looking for a job, unless you're highly specialized, unless you're in IT and in a very specialized role, then yes, you can do that. But I'd like to paint it this way. Think about this: as an employer, unless I really need you, I'm going to hire you. I'm going to spend all of this money and pay Brandon just to get the authorization to hire you, because we have to go through a process where we look at the Canadian job market to make sure that, bringing in this foreign worker is not taking away a job from a Canadian. That's a very long and grueling process on purpose. I get emails all day long. Sir, I need a job in Canada. Get me a job. Can I have a job? I give the courtesy of responding, but I'm like, you're not going to get a job, because think about it. I'm going to go through as an employer, spend all this money, bring somebody here that I've never met, never seen their work experience or their quality, and then who knows what happens. So that scenario is highly unlikely. And on top of that, there's so many people that are doing that. And I would also like to interject something else, because it's also one of the easiest ways for somebody to be tricked or scammed or something along that, because I see it all the time where people are like, oh, I've gotten this. And I'm like, yeah, that's fake, because I know what the document looks like and I see it. And I'm like, yeah, no, you've just paid somebody who's taken your money. And that's the easiest one. If somebody's offering you a job and asking you to pay for it, immediately right there, that is illegal here. And that's it. But that's what everybody does. So not to be dark on that, but it's also kind of my public service announcement to your listeners. Do not pay anybody for a job, because it doesn't work out. It's illegal. And even if it was a legit job that you actually arrived in and you paid for, you could have misrepresentation ramifications later on. So the person that you paid the money to is gone with your money, but you're holding all the liability. Mm-hmm. Now, the second scenario that you talked about, which was the student looking for the job, fantastic. That is something that you can do. Now, it is challenging for people who are unprepared. Okay. And I'll say that again. It's challenging for people who are unprepared. Some people will struggle with that, but it's the people that are unprepared. This is why I've built my whole system around the immigration success system, where I have different things for different categories of people and what they should be doing at different times. So I'll give you an example. As a student, a lot of times what happens with students is, say our school year starts in September. They will arrive in September. And then what happens is they're like, yay, I'm in Canada. Woohoo. Look at me. I'm hanging out. I'm taking some selfies. We'll go to the CN Tower. Yay, fun. Okay, fantastic. Do all that. However, you're going to graduate. If it's on a 1-year certificate, you're going to graduate in May. Okay. You have some disadvantages, right? You're going to be graduating with not only all the other international students, but you're going to be graduating with all the local students. The local students will have a network here already. They might have worked a summer job. They might have an employer. They might have all of these different things. And you're going to have to get started and build your network and see about understanding what the job is and being able to get that so that you can compete. As a student, when you come here, you can work for 20 hours a week while you're here. That's a good time to go find a job that would qualify you, work in that job, and then also look at jobs that will lead to full-time employment afterwards. Another example is being strategic in the program that you choose. A lot of times, if you look at a postgraduate program at the college level, what you'll find is that it's cheaper for the international tuition rates, a lot cheaper than university. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that you'll find is that a lot of them have work or internship opportunities, sometimes also paid. So you're actually going to school and you're getting paid, and it will lead to a job for you later on. If you're smart about it, what I do with my clients and the people that work with me, I'm like, okay, great. Celebrate your win. You're in Canada. Awesome. Welcome. Now let's get started on the second phase. So when all the other students are sleeping and doing all their stuff and hanging out and, blah, 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 my clients and the people that are working with me are already planning the next step. I look at it very simply. You have to have a plan, right? Where you put that together and you do all of that up front. You know exactly what you're going to do prior to even coming here or even filing your first application. You have to do that. Then you have to execute on the plan, and then you have to settle in, right? And that's part of the 3 things that I have in my system: planning, execution, and settlement. A lot of times when people come here, they don't think about their settlement. They don't think about what their plan is. They don't think about where they're going to be. They don't think about what type of job they're going to have. And they don't design their life around what they want, which is something that I actually preach a lot. Anyways, I'm going to stop there. I think I answered your question and did a few other things there, but did that answer the question?
Yes, I have a follow-up question. I know
Sure.
in some countries that getting one job is one thing, right? Getting the visa is another thing.
Mhm.
And is it like this in Canada? If someone already get a job from a company, would the person get a visa automatically or not so easy?
If it's a worker coming in here or a
Yes.
student?
I mean, anyway, if the person already received a job offer from a company in Canada.
So if they received a job offer, there's different types of job offers. I'll give you a basic one. So a basic one is an LMIA, which means they have to go through the process to be able to do that. Or is it LMIA exempt, which means that you don't actually have to go through that. If it's LMIA exempt, that's usually something that's like an intra-company transfer, for instance, where you're working for a company overseas, say in France, and then they have a branch office here. If you worked for that company 1 year within the last 3 and you were in a managerial role and you were coming here to do something like train workers or whatever, then you don't require an LMIA. You can actually come with the proper paperwork, show up at the border. Now, I'm being very general in that. Does that shed a bit more light? Like it's easy to do if you have that. Going through the LMIA process with somebody that you've never met, it's very rare. I've never done that. I've been doing this for over 10 years and I've never done that. Like usually what happens is the workers or the employers will come to me. They'll say, hey, I want to hire this person. Now, on that note, I want to say one other thing because this is important and I should bring this up. There's another program called the International Experience Class, which is the working holiday or the young professionals. So for instance, a lot of countries in Europe, Spain, for instance, you can come here and you can get an open work permit for 1 year under the working holiday. And then you can get another one for another year under the young professionals. Ireland, for instance, you can get a 2-year work permit. UK, same thing. Australia, you can do that. And there's unlimited number of spots. Like I believe I haven't looked at the numbers recently because the program is actually just recently opened up. But for Ireland, there's 15,000 work permits there that you can just go get an open work permit, plan yourself out and just come. Same with the UK, right? And lots of countries in Europe for that. So there's another opportunity for people that are generally under 35 that want to come and get an open work permit and work.
And for students who studied in Canada and graduated and find a job in the local companies, would that be easier for the companies to get a visa for them?
They would get an open work permit, a postgraduate open work permit. So once you go to school here, if you go to school for a 1-year program, you'll get a 1-year open work permit. So you can go work anywhere you want and work as much as you want in any place that you want. If you study for 2 years, then you'll get a 3-year open work permit. And that's how you get your experience. There's no conditions placed on you and you can work and do whatever you want, just the same as me.
What happened after this 1 year and 3-year open work permit period?
Well, that's where the strategy comes in. You need to be able to get a job in skilled work. This is the biggest problem with students. They get into a job and they don't understand what they're doing and they think that it's skilled work when in actual fact it's not. They haven't planned it out. And then what they've done is they've wasted their time. If you're only coming for a 1-year program, then you're up against a clock because that if you need that 40 points, for instance, you really have to be very smart and strategic in terms of when you're going to apply and when you're going to get that. And there's different ways to extend it out, like little, I don't want to say loopholes, but legal loopholes, where you can actually play some of the processing times of the system and be able to get, extra time on that. But you have to be smart about that. 100%, it just boils down to planning and that's it. That's it. As long as people have their solid plan and they understand where their end goal is and how they're going to actually get there, you're going to be successful. That's what I've seen over the years.
And
no secret. in anything in life, really.
Yeah, planning and know where is your goal and then have a strategy and a plan and execute.
That's it. Yeah. If you want to go and become a doctor, well, what's the plan? Well, I got to go to do this, and then I got to go to med school, and then I got to do my residency, and I got to, like, anything in life is a plan, and immigration is exactly the same. And it's really surprising to me that there's a good chunk of people that they get on the internet and they're like, oh, look, it's all on the government website. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, there's so many things, and people don't plan all the different things about. And part of why I've put that in my system with the settlement side is that what people don't understand is, what are you going to do when you're here? Prior to me helping people with the legal work, I helped newcomers in Canada settle for 2 years. And it was amazing to me how many people showed up with no plan whatsoever. They were like, yay, we're in Canada. It's awesome. And I'm like, okay, what are you going to do? It can go bad if you have no plan. Like, I've seen families uprooted and they can't find a job, and they think that, oh, it's going to be easy because it was easy for my friend. And I'm like, no, it's not. You got to have that plan. So there's a lot of things that you can do prior to coming here. Like, for instance, if you're in a regulated profession, why not get all your credentials done while you're sitting in your home country, and you can send that in? Like, as a nurse, for instance, you can actually, in Ontario, send everything in, get your stuff sorted out so that your credential will be recognized up until the point of your PR. And then as soon as you get your PR, you can finalize it and start working as a nurse, as opposed to like arriving here and saying, oh man, I need this document, and then calling your sister up in your country and having to sign this form and get your sister to get a document. And you know what I mean? So
yes.
Do it all in advance.
Also, they can also learn the language in advance. If they plan to study in Canada or the French-speaking region, they can already prepare and take some
100%.
Language lessons. So if any of our audience wants to get a second passport in Canada or think about study or working in Canada, how can they reach out to you?
So my website is mysecondpassport.ca. They can go check that out. But for your listeners, if they want to reach out directly to me, my email is brandon@mysecondpassport.ca. And I have a book. It's called Second Passport. It talks about my system, and it talks about all the different planning stages. And if they just reach out and they say that they heard this podcast on your show, I would be more than happy to send them an electronic copy of the book. You know, it's available on Amazon if you want a hard copy. But again, I'm just happy that people would read it. So just reach out, and no, you're not going to be speaking to my assistant. I'm not going to put you in some funnel and email you or whatever. Just say, hey, you know, my name's such and such. I heard you. I'm interested in learning some more. Can you send me a copy of your ebook? And I would love to do that. So brandon@mysecondpassport.ca. Just send me an email and I'll send you a free copy of my ebook.
Lovely. So audience, if you are interested, all the information will be in the show notes. Reach out to Brandon, read his book. And thank you so much for being here, Brandon.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fast Track Podcast. Show me your support by liking this episode and sharing it with your friends. Join the Facebook group at Fast Track Podcast 1, or you can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and of course the homepage fasttrack.life. See you in the next episode.